Hey, what's up? Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
And my name is Dyl, and today we're back with some more predictions. We've done Best Picture, we've done the acting categories, but let's skip over Screenplay and Director for right now, and let's dive into all these technical categories. We haven't done these in a few months, and I feel there's a lot of updates.
This is going to be a long video. We've got so many updates. Number one, Life of Chuck, booted to 2025. Roll clip on my Curb Your Enthusiasm moment of saying there's not a single distributor in the world that would release this next year. And then Neon decided to absolutely ruin my entire career by putting it next summer. Do you think it's still going to be a contender next year? It has that People's Choice Award. Do you think that'll still carry through?
It's a really interesting question because I know that we were a little bit different with its prospects if it came out this year. And moving to next year, obviously, we don't know many contenders, but I feel like something that you said about Hitman and that we're seeing play out is the buzz. While these films were super acclaimed upon their festival premiere, are these films still as strong as I've seen for before? I know that this one has the TIFF stat, it has Neon, but Neon tends to like their films out of the can. And if they get another dog out of can next year, are we right in the same boat where Neon has their big dog and then it's like, oh, do we have room for number two? So for me, I'm still probably, when we do our predictions in like March, I probably won't have this in Best Picture. I'll probably have it like 11, 12, kind of where I just had it here when it was slated for potentially 2024.
I'll keep it hanging around that same sort of range. Look, the reason the People's Choice Award works as a predictor is because it creates momentum. And momentum is a thing that you can't recreate. When a film comes off the People's Choice Award, releases 2 months later, that's why it gets into the Oscars, because people are talking about it, people are thinking about it. It's top of mind. But for Life of Chuck to have all that momentum, and then everyone's going to forget about it, and then it's going to come back in the summertime, it's not a People's Choice Award winner at that point because people aren't thinking of it that way. They're thinking of it as a summer movie. The momentum right now, crazy. Momentum in the summer doesn't exist. And that's what we saw with Sing Sing. That's what we saw with Hitman. Now, this still will be bigger than either of those movies, at least with audiences. Maybe that popularity of Stephen King will be enough to get this into the awards conversation no matter what. But I think next year we have to treat it as though it's not a People's Choice Award winner. That momentum died when they pushed it.
Well, speaking about dying, we've both seen Joker at this point. You'll see our reactions to the film kind of reflected here in our predictions.
And before we get into those predictions, I'll just say big fat goose eggs, 0, nothing for Joker, 0 nominations anywhere.
Well, let's dive into Best Cinematography where I do have Joker still getting a nomination. Call me crazy, you can call me dumb. I have it in because I think this film is going to at least stay in the conversation because of its technical prowess. Eyes are already on it from the predecessor. Will that work in its favor for multiple nominations? Maybe not, but if Joker gets anything, I feel like cinematography, and I think another category we'll talk about in a little bit, would be the 2 safest ones, but that's not what I'm using my segment to talk about. You see my shirt, we're talking text today. Dune Part 2, I have it winning this category. We've talked all year about, can a sequel to a film that's already won this category win again? And earlier, I wasn't really on that board. I was like, no, there's other options, but as the year goes on, there's one major option as an alternative, which I'm sure you'll talk about. We've seen the visuals for Dune Part 2. They're gorgeous, they're beautiful, they're very different from the first film. They're introducing new factors, new features, including the black and white. I still have Denis Villeneuve winning Best Director. And the outlook I have for this award season, I'm not saying it's 100% going to happen, but I can still see the path. And if he is winning Director, I feel like cinematography would come along with his win. And the campaign has already started here for Warner Brothers for Dune. They had a 4-year consideration screening the other day in New York, and apparently it played very well. Greg Fraser wasn't there, but I'm sure they'll get him out here shortly. I feel like it's the safest thing for a nomination in this category at the moment.
Okay, first off, I'll say I'm not going to call you crazy. I'm not going to call you dumb. I'm going to call you a dreamer. You ride with the movies you love, and I respect the hell out of that. To see Joker going down the drain and still predict it for like 4 or 5 techs and a supporting actress nomination, that is principled. Now, that said, I stand by the thing that I've been beating the drum for all year long. Sequels don't win cinematography. This is one of the gatekeepiest categories. Could Dune break from that? Yes, it absolutely could. It is enough of an achievement But not even Lord of the Rings could do it, man. Like, this could be our big snub in the category this year. And I just feel like people are going to want to go for something more fresh, more new.
I think that this is a film that the branch will react to, and something I'll talk about with the next film is this branch tends to do cool things, especially from cinematographers that they do already know in the category. Sometimes, though, it's not usually for their follow-up film, but again, stats are meant to be broken every year. We haven't had many follow-up sequels to really compete for these type of awards as we have been getting the last few years. Avatar: The Way of Water as another cinematography to go out there and miss. That could be the sign here for Dune, for Joker both to fail. I will probably come around on Joker taking out. I just kind of want to see some of these other films before I do take out. But the other one in cinematography that I want to touch on here is The Nickel Boys, and it's one that's out there. I think there's a lot of buzz around this movie without a lot of people actually having seen it. It's played at 2 festivals so far, and it seems very polarizing. People are 100 and a 10 out of 10, and there's people who are kind of a little bit more mixed. If you look at the Metacritic score, currently it's at like a 90 right now, but it doesn't have that many reviews. You have the Telluride polls that don't really bode very well, but the people who love it seem to really love this film. And the main things you hear about The Nickel Boys is the artistic direction from the director's chair of Rommel Ross and his camera, because this film implements a point of view style, which is something very different we see in the cinematography category, that they will go out of their way to nominate films that have very different, very bold visions with their cinematography. So even if Nickel Boys is not a top 10 film in Best Picture, I think this is a prime example of a film that can make its way into this category even without that major prize. I currently have this in Best Picture. I think this just adds to its overall package to show its strength from top to bottom.
You keep saying that the cinematography branch does cool things, and alternately, I'll say that the Zone of Interest shows, and the snub for that shows, that sometimes they leave the cool thing out. So what if the POV style is too much for them? What if it's too artful, too different, and they snub this in favor of something a little bit easier to digest? I still think this is a picture player. I think it's a director player, but it feels more like a director nomination movie to me than it does a cinematography nomination. It's so outside the box. It feels like the type of thing that might get in every single critic group for cinematography, seem like it should be the front runner, and then just struggle with industry nominations in cinematography.
That is a very possible outcome for it. I see this movie on Monday, not sure when this video is coming out, so you can kind of give more thoughts there in the comments once this video posts. Without seeing a lot of these other contenders yet, and just the overall strength I think this film is going to have, especially at critics groups, I think it can survive the season.
I'd love to see it happen. Anyways, I have some questions for you. First off, Maria at number 10. That's crazy. Did you see the trailer for this?
I have seen the trailer, and at least to me, it just speaks more overall to the overall vibe around Maria right now. It seems like it's on the downward trajectory where I could see it end up missing some of those other categories that we automatically previously thought it was a lock for. I know another thing that will be a question here is a complete unknown. I kind of see one of these movies coexisting in our cinematography line because they're both focusing around some of the same similar shots, both around musicians, and even the trailer has a very similar shot between the two. And I just think of a complete unknown as the stronger overall player. The buzz around Maria isn't as strong, and maybe we'll see once we get into campaign season. Is Netflix really gunning for this film, or are they just sitting back and being like, okay, we have other dogs we're worrying about, especially in this category. Let's just focus on Jolie. Let's just focus on makeup, maybe costumes.
You know what the buzz was even weaker for? El Conde.
It is true, but El Conde has the black and white.
And this does too.
Is the whole movie black and white?
No, it's like half black and white, half color, which is another thing that we know this branch kind of loves. That was Maestro. The counterpoint is, like, what if you crossed Spencer with Maestro? And I know Spencer didn't get that nomination. This is Ed Lachman. He hasn't been the perennial favorite of the branch, but it feels like they're really trying to award him a lot as he's sort of advancing in age, as he's becoming this legend in the industry that they really haven't given his flowers all that many times in the past.
You talk about black and white. I have some films with black and white in my top 5 and some even a little bit above it. It just goes back to the overall buzz around this film. And like you said, last year with El Conde, where the buzz wasn't really there, but then it still came out at the end of the season.
Does Dune really count for that, though?
I would say Dune counts as a little bit because it's a way to showcase the differences of the filmmaking style from the first film to the second film.
But the black and white in Dune is not like the camera is going black and white. The explanation for it in the movie is that it's the way that the light exists with the black sun. But it's not like they just turned the camera black and white. They're doing everything with the set design. They're doing everything with the lighting to make it monochromatic. And so I'd say that's more of a production design point than it is a cinematography point. Let's talk about Dune a little bit more. I know I just kind of came down on Dune and said, it's not winning everything, it's won on the first one. And here's me now saying that I have Dune winning best editing. I'm defaulting back to the sound and editing combo, which has been such a steady thing to look at year in, year out, for like over 10 years. And yes, last year it broke with Oppenheimer and Zone of Interest. But that was because Zone of Interest just legitimately had some of the best sound work of all time. And yes, the year before, it broke with Everything Ever All at Once and Top Gun. But that's because Everything Ever All at Once was a Best Picture sweeper that had some of the most in-your-face editing that I'd ever seen in my entire life. Both of those breaks make a lot of sense. I don't see anything that's like an undeniable editing winner. It feels a little bit like the last time that Dune won, where you look at that editing lineup and you go, nothing here stands out. So I'm just defaulting here.
That is a very fair assessment. It's something that I was actually sitting with for the majority of this season. However, if I don't have Dune in picture, and I know I have it winning director, but like I feel like if it's taking cinematography, if it's taking director, if it's taking editing, then it kind of needs to win picture. I put Anora. Anora doesn't feel like a winner in terms of editing, at least from your description of the editing. There's other people out there who, from their reviews, say it's a little bit more flashier. So it's kind of one of those things where I'm kind of doing the reverse of you, of defaulting to that because I have it winning picture, whereas maybe when I see it, maybe when I see Amelia Perez, I might transition over to that. I see the case for Dune even if I don't personally have it.
I understand the logic of saying that Dune, if it wins all of these, why doesn't it win Best Picture? I'd ask the same last time. I mean, it won, 6 awards last time without winning picture and without a directing nomination. I know you think it's winning director. If it was winning directing and editing, then that's a different thing. But I guess I would just say editing doesn't correlate with Best Picture that often. I know that it did last year with Oppenheimer. It did with Everything Ever All at Once. The last time before Everything Everywhere All at Once that an editing winner won Best Picture was 2012 with Argo. Editing and picture do not need to correlate. Dune winning editing doesn't make it stronger for picture, in my opinion, at least. So in terms of the other contenders that I see here, I've got The Brutalist on my list, and normally I'd see the length of that as being a detractor in this category, being a 3.5 hour long movie. But lately it feels like the nominees in this category are getting longer and longer. Last year we had Killers of the Flower Moon and Oppenheimer. The Brutalist, not only is it not a detractor that it's 3.5 hours, but I think that the sheer fact that it's so energetic and keeps the pace up for 3.5 hours, never once getting dull, that is an incredible achievement. And then we've got Amelia Perez, which I think could be a really serious win contender because of the frenetic pace and the musical sequences, really in-your-face, flashy editing. Also, outside of Dune and maybe Conclave, this is the only thing really contending for a nomination in both editing and sound. You could maybe say Blitz if it's really strong, but I don't think Blitz is really contending that much for an editing nomination as much as it is for sound. But again, we see that stat over and over that usually the editing winner has a sound nomination. Everything Ever All at Once didn't, but it was probably very, very close to that sound nomination. There's Anora, which I think is safer than maybe anything for a nomination. On a personal level, I've mentioned before, the editing was one of the weaker elements to it. The montage, the way that they cut to just kind of random things, it can feel a little bit scattershot at times. The editing is not really what makes that film shine. Also, gotta mention two that I don't have in my top 5, but I still feel like have a shot, which is, for one thing, Saturday Night, which can squeeze into a nom. Possibly, it's got very fast-paced, chaotic, frenetic editing, which all takes place in the very short time of 90 minutes. Real-time editing, and the way that it moves forward has such momentum. Even if this misses Best Picture, which is looking more and more and more likely, I could see this be a Baby Driver. Currently not predicting this in my top 5, but I'm very close to that. And I also feel like Challengers can still make it on that same criteria of being a ridiculously fast-paced film where editing is a centerpiece.
I think your point about Saturday Night, I know I've kind of become like a Saturday Night hater here. I think that your point about editing is very fair.
It's funny that you're a hater on this film because I think you're going to like it much more than I do.
I think I'll like it a lot too. I think I've just always been very low in its awards chances, but it's a film I'm super looking forward to. I think it looks like a lot of fun. And I think Challengers kind of fits in that same boat. Both of those films probably aren't Best Picture contenders, but like you said, they could be a Baby Driver. They could be an I, Tonya. And the editing work sounds like, at least from Saturday Night, and I know from Challengers, is so flashy that I think it will be staples throughout awards season where it will pop up at random shows and be in that top 7, top 8 by the end of the year. It's like maybe, but most likely not.
What do you think about Emilia Perez maybe being a win contender here? Because I'm really debating. I feel like it's a stronger movie than Dune, but it's not a sound winner. But it is a sound nominee.
It's kind of funny you ask that because I did have Emilia Perez as my editing winner when I was typing these out before making like final adjustments and moving a little bit further down my list. The divisiveness of the overall film, that's kind of holding me back because I feel like editing is something that you need to be a well-liked film to really win. I know there are occasional super divisive films to take this because they're just that showy, but they tend to be season sweepers. And I don't see Emilia Perez being a season sweeper in this category.
No, or really any category. And it's so divisive. And I keep seeing people on Reddit being like, it's not really divisive, it's just bigots. No. This is a film that's getting equal amounts of hate from both transgender people and transphobic people. It's a hot button movie, and it's one that I think is going to have a lot of discourse that a lot of people aren't ready for, especially on the Reddit sphere. I keep seeing people just completely writing off how many problems trans people have with this movie. I haven't heard a single trans critic speak favorably about this film. Anyways, let's move on to Best Sound, because my win pick here is Dune Part 2, because it's Dune. It's just Dune. What else can even win here? Nothing. This is so strong in the sound category that it makes me consider it in editing. Like, that's how big this movie is for sound. I can't see anything else winning. There's no other path. It's locked. It's as locked as a visual effects win.
I would fully agree with that. And there's another movie in this category I kind of want to point our attention to because I feel like this would be the real, debate of this category. After seeing Twisters, I was so let down with the sound design, and other people who we know who work in the sound industry have also been very let down. So I just want to hear your case for still having it top 5 because I do see the avenue because I was talking about it all season long, but I just sadly moved it down myself.
There's 2 types of nominees in the sound category. Let's call it La 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 or Boom Boom Pow. And occasionally there's a third type being like the zone of interest. To me, Twisters is like the quintessential Boom Boom Pow movie where it's just loud. The sound effects are big. They are all over the place. There are a lot of movies like this year, and Twisters was not like some massive box office sensation. But at the same time, looking at what I have below it, Furiosa, also a Boom Boom Pow movie that I don't feel like has the momentum or has the love to get in. Gladiator 2 could be a bigger Boom Boom Pow. I feel a little bit more confident with Blitz, with Emilia Perez, with Dune. We have movies that have battles that I just feel better about in this category than Gladiator. Twisters for me, yes, I've heard a lot of people not be that impressed by the sound work, but it just feels so obvious in its sound where like you can see the sound on screen. That's my sort of argument at the moment. But really, outside of Dune, the only thing that I feel very strong about in this category is Emilia Perez. Because not only is it a La 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 musical, it also has the Boom Boom Pow. It's also got gunshots. It's got cars. In a different year, I could see this being the top dog in the category. Everything else, I'm kind of just like, complete unknown. It's got music. Blitz, it's got explosions. Twisters, it's got weather and explosions and, whatever.
We just talked about 2 categories that Dune seems pretty likely, and let's do a third. Best Visual Effects, Dune Part 2, number 1. Do I really need to talk about it? Not really. We already know why. Sadly, the Apes, they're number 2 to a movie that's just way too strong. But that's where this category gets fun. The other 3 spots, I would say, are pretty wide open, even if some seem a lot stronger than others, because there's Gladiator 2. Shouldn't miss, but I think there's a world it could miss. And then that's where I think really the more debates start. Number 4 is Mufasa for me. They did the first one, they could do the second one. They're switching the style up a little bit. They're a little bit more animated, and I think this movie will perform a little bit better than what people are thinking currently with critics, with audiences, and I think it could just be the fun family type movie that we always kind of see gets in here with its animal work. And then number 5 is Here. We've talked a lot about Here before with visual effects, and my big case for it is it's revolutionary, and maybe it's Dune's real competition. If you want to say it has competition for a potential win, it's changing Tom Hanks to a younger version. It's changing Robin Wright to a younger version, and I feel like as long as it doesn't look awful, people will respond to it, and I feel like it will be a presence. But I also could see Here being the major snub once we get to shortlist.
It's true that it is new and it's fresh and it's work on iconic actors. We saw that work with The Irishman, but this is all going to depend on it not looking like shit. And nothing I've seen from the trailers so far has convinced me that this doesn't look like shit. I still have it for a nomination, but when the film comes out, I have a bad feeling that the number one thing we're gonna hear is faces look creepy and it looks like shit.
The looks like shit's inevitable because I think there's a lot of people out there who thinks The Irishman also kind of looks like shit.
Yeah, it does.
The positive for Irishman, it was a Best Picture movie. And you go to last year with Dial of Destiny, Indiana Jones, we all were like, oh, it's getting in. And then it missed because while some people thought it looked like shit, some people thought it looked great. The movie didn't really work for anyone. So I think more so than it looking like shit is just, what is the reaction to Here? Is it this movie's fine? Is it this movie's awful? Or is it this movie's good? If it's less than good to awful, then I think that's where it misses.
Can an animated movie ever get this nomination? Because twice in the last 5 years, we've seen CG animated movies get to the final round of the shortlist. Soul for its lighting effects, Spider-Man for everything. And I think it's really worth considering and worth noting that The Wild Robot is genuinely revolutionary in how they animated it. Every single surface, every single asset that you see in The Wild Robot is hand painted. And then the painting is brought into 3D modeling and animated from there. So it's a mix of hand drawn and digital animation that has never been done before. That, to me, feels like a shortlist at the very least. And depending on how strong the film is, maybe it's a nomination. Can an animated film ever get this nomination? And if so, why not The Wild Robot?
It definitely can happen. It just kind of stings that the 2 examples you just gave were historically weak years for this category. And those films were pretty strong, at least in terms of reception, and Soul getting multiple other nominations, and they still failed to get the nominations. So to me, it's going to take a lot, but I think it can happen.
To be fair, do you not think this is a historically weak year for this category, seeing as Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes is your number 2 and you have Mufasa and Here in the top 5, which are, I think, firmly seen when people view the trailers as some of the worst shit people have ever seen?
I do agree with part of that point. I think Apes doesn't warrant that negativity. I think Apes is very strong work, but I guess for Mufasa, I think a lot of people just want it to fail, and maybe some people generally do think it looks awful, but I think some people may be overzealing that a little bit. Here, though, that's a very fair point.
I'm really on Barry Jenkins' side. I think this movie will be good. Every single trailer that they put out, it looks worse and worse. And that's the visual effects. It's not the story. It's not, like, I am down to see this movie, but the visual effects look worse every single time they put new stuff out. Also, I'd like to put forward an alternate to Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. This is not happening, but I'd like to say that Better Man is the better visual effects Apes movie of the year. I think it's got far more impressive VFX than King of the Planet of the Apes. It's crazy to me that Paramount put $120 million into a biopic of a singer where they just replaced the singer with a monkey in every single shot. It's insane. But that said, likely to get a BAFTA nomination for visual effects.
In fact, it could even kick out another Apes movie, being Godzilla and Kong, which
Yeah.
typically does find their way onto the shortlist, just never actually gets the nomination. Maybe this time around they're like, okay, well, let's just not even put you on the shortlist because we have other monkey movies to support. I guess going back to the animation thing one more time, I do agree that it's going to happen. Going back to those weak years, the year Soul missed, it lost out to like Love and Monsters and movies that no one cared about whatsoever in that category. Like, if it couldn't even get in there, well, granted, Wild Robot may be more impressive work from top to bottom, I just feel like it's going to take a lot for a film to get in. But if Wild Robot could find its way into score, if it could find its way into like adapted. Maybe visual effects could find its way up into the top 5. It's one of those things I think will be the cool shortlist, because this category, just like hair and makeup, always has a very interesting and intriguing shortlist where I could see stuff like Better Man that you mentioned before. The Substance make a long list here for visual effects, because a lot of the makeup work is actual visual effects where they're just blending the two, and I feel like if people know that, it could go a little bit further. And I'm sure there's some other movies I'm just blanking on right now that are cool work but not cool enough to make it to the top 5.
I suppose the way I feel with the animated thing is that CG movies continually showing up on the list, saying that more and more people are taking them seriously every year. So in 2020, yes, they didn't take them seriously. Last year, again, it couldn't get the nomination. But I think Spider-Man was probably closer to a nomination than Soul was. And so we could see with every time that a CG animated film gets onto the visual effects shortlist, they could get closer and closer and closer. And at what point does it break in? And I think The Wild Robot might be closer than ever to breaking in, because I think that the branch is opening their minds a little bit more.
And I would love to see it. I thought the film was phenomenal, and the visual effects, the animation were top notch. I just think it's really going to take an animated film to be potentially in that top 10 of Best Picture to kind of come along with it, to fully break the mold. But it'd be cool if they could do it without the Best Picture nomination.
Anyways, let's move to the next category, which is Best Production Design. And here's my controversial win. I feel like I already know what you're going to say. I have Blitz winning here, which is wild because for a very long time, I've been the biggest Blitz denier probably in the entire punditry sphere. But if there's one thing I'm taking away from that trailer, it's that the production design is stellar. The crumbling buildings, the things set on fire, gorgeous work all around. The production designer of the film is Adam Stockhausen, who is a favorite of the branch. He has 4 nominations: West Side Story, Grand Budapest Hotel, Bridge of Spies, 12 Years a Slave. And it's worth noting that he would probably be a 5-time nominee if West Side Story wasn't the same year as The French Dispatch. This just looks like some of his most grand work. Not only does that seem like a nomination, it feels like it could be very strong for a win. Now, let me guess what you're going to say. Lone production design wins don't happen.
That actually wasn't going to be my response. My response was going to be your first statement of you've been the biggest Blitz hater of the year. I'm surprised you even have Blitz in your top 5, but I don't hate it. For a while, I was considering the fact of Nosferatu being a lone production design for completely different reasons, but at least now I know if I did say that, it wouldn't be met with that claim of lone winners don't really happen.
People say this all the time. You can't win production design without winning something else. I think that's just coincidence. Often production design winners come along with like cinematography, because obviously if it looks good in one way, it's going to look very good in another way as well.
When we have those films that we think could be lone production design winners, the reason why they don't win is just because the film's not really loved that much. Like Babylon is a film that everyone would say like, oh, it can't win production design because that would be its only win. We have to pick something else. We got to pick score. But the reason why that probably couldn't win score, couldn't win production design on their own is probably because just the film wasn't as loved enough. It wasn't as acclaimed enough to get past that. And Blitz could be a film that could showcase, hey, we're in Best Picture because Babylon wasn't. We can win this category and not win anything else. Or it could suffer the same fate as Babylon and kind of drop a little further down the list.
To be fair, I see Blitz right now as Nightmare Alley, aka a film that doesn't have a lot of passion, that gets into picture with 1 or 2 techs, even though everyone pretty firmly goes, eh. Anyways, though, what else do I have in this category? Well, first off, I have The Brutalist, which has huge buildings. They're very central to the plot. It is about building things. There's a narrative here with how cheaply it was done. They made The Brutalist for under $10 million, and they still managed to build cathedrals and mansions. And the things that they do for how cheap it is, it's incredible. But it's just not as flashy. It's brutalism. Right? Like, it's not really beautiful stuff. Concrete and, like, harsh, straight faces on buildings. It's not really the prettiest stuff, but it is central to the plot, so it's still worth considering for a win there. And then there's Dune, which obviously has very grand work, but again, been there, done that. We gave it the award last time. What things is it doing that's new? We've got Getty Prime. Are we just giving an award for Getty Prime? I feel like everything else we've seen a variation of, even The Siege. So I'm just not sure what is here that will motivate people to give it a second Oscar for the same stuff. But then there's Nosferatu, which you were mentioning before. And wow, that trailer has me absolutely shook. I thought this was going to look like a Northman level film where it's good, but it's not brilliant. That trailer, Dylan, I might be getting on your boat at some point soon of Nosferatu being a big contender. The way that it looks like it's using models, miniatures, stunning stuff. Some things I don't have in my top 5. I feel like if here isn't hated, this is a good place for it, just because of how the location changes with time. Also, Saturday night. I'm going to keep mentioning Saturday night wherever I can. I still feel like it's possible here and how it recreates the entirety of the iconic 30 Rock set so accurately and with such an attention to detail.
I just like how you're coming around to Nosferatu. I would love if that kind of made its way back into the race as a little full circle moment. Like, hey, I had this early on. I got rid of it, but hey, I can put it back in there, especially with Joker in the decline. It's one of those where I fully agree with what you said, and I would say entertain its thought in some other categories, especially because we have major contenders dropping left and right, and we'll know if Blitz here in about a week or so if that one is dropping as well, or if it's here to actually stay.
And you'll really know because you're going to be seeing it.
I will be seeing it. And another thing with Blitz that I know we've both been talking about for a little bit is its costume work, while I currently don't have it. And it's one of those where it could move up a little bit. Dune Part 2 is my winner. I'm not going to talk about that. I want to talk about some of these other movies. The first one I want to talk about is Wicked. Regardless of this movie's quality, I think that the costumes is going to be the major thing behind the push. There is going to be so many costumes inside this film. There's going to be dresses. There are going to be suits. Such a range of work. I even feel like if Wicked's hated, I think this could still be a nomination because we've seen before the costume branch category will kind of go out for different, more original type things compared to the rest of the Academy.
It fits in with stuff like Cruella or Mulan or Mary Poppins Returns, so you can't deny that it is an archetype that gets nominations. I just worry that being a 2-hour and 40-minute long part 1 of a 2-hour and 15-minute total musical might make this feel as a whole unsatisfying and could lead to it underperforming both critically and commercially. And if it's not a huge hit, I find it really hard to see this happening really anywhere.
It's a different time here, but you go back to like the mid 2010s where you have a lot of these fantasy type movies that come out that aren't really best picture players whatsoever. They do hit in some of these technical categories. And yes, I think the runtime for this Wicked movie is pretty absurd. I think if they're going this route, they must have at least something they're trying to do with it. So maybe they're expanding from the original source material novel. Maybe it's new original stuff. We'll really have to see, but I just feel like the work here is going to be super showy. If you look at this category as a whole, Wicked feels the most different from everything else here. There's a lot of films that have, I don't want to say the same type of costumes, but variances of the same type of costumes. And then it's kind of just Wicked being this eye-popping thing. Emilia Perez would be another one that does have very eye-popping costumes, at least from the trailer. But from what I've heard from some people, sometimes it may not be as showy, but it is very prevalent throughout.
Yeah, definitely. I've just recently put Emilia Perez as my number 1 in the category just because I feel like something we see time in, time out with the costume design category is it's whatever has things that stick in your mind the most, whatever feels like the most iconic. Emilia Perez, it's got a few costumes in it that are very memorable. Zoe Saldana's red suit that she wears during the El Mal sequence. That and a few other big flashy costumes could be enough for a win. Thinking about it more and more, I could be convinced to put Blitz as number 1 in this category because again, the costumes in that look really flashy. And that was another one of the takeaways I had from that trailer. Trailer to me was, this movie looks kind of bland, kind of forgettable, but wow, the design elements are amazing. Also, I mean, Maria has so many costumes in that trailer. Every single shot, it's just like, here's 1,000 new costumes. I'm becoming more and more convinced that Maria's package could be actress, cinematography, and costume design. I'll also just say, don't count The Brutalist out. Oppenheimer got in last year with less costume work, and yes, Oppenheimer was such a massive sweeper. The Brutalist is doing quite a lot, and we do have to entertain the fact that Brutalist could be not Oppenheimer size, but getting there. You know, there is a world where Brutalist wins like 7 Oscars. Also, Conclave is really, really low in the top 10, just reflecting how many costumes the movie has.
Maria definitely makes sense. It just goes back to my point earlier. I feel like this film is trajectorying downwards, but if it has a resurgence later on down the line, like which some Netflix films typically do have in the course of award season, then really my predictions will reflect that. My question for Brutalist would be, does Adrian Brody wear an iconic hat like Oppenheimer?
No, but he has a pretty iconic jacket.
Okay, well, if the jacket catches on like the hat did last year, I'll move it up here a little bit. And then for Conclave, maybe I've seen the wrong reactions to this film, because I definitely heard about it in our server the other day when we were talking about new predictions. This film was good. It's not great. Its texts are good. They're not great. And I feel like Conclave is an easy film to kind of pluck out of some of these categories where it doesn't need 8, 7 nominations. It can get by with 4 or 5 or 6.
It can, but it also can get all of those things. Nothing in it is like bad or forgettable. It's all good. Some people are going to be in love with it. I feel like no one is going to hate the film. I don't think it's an easy film to root against, but it's also not a film that's going to have a ton of passion. But that said, everyone has like jewelry on, everyone has the same cardinal outfits. On one hand, the fact that everyone is basically wearing the same costume could move it down, but everyone is wearing a costume.
We have to dive into makeup and hairstyling now.
Well, we currently both have Dune Part 2 as our winner. This is another one that I don't feel entirely right about, but it would win on the backs of the Harkonnens. Fade Rautha, the Baron, Beast Rabban. There's so much makeup on those actors. It's also an award that this didn't win on the first one that they could give this time because they haven't done it before. So much of my argument against Dune winning in all of these categories is they've already done that. They've already given it that award. Makeup is an award that they haven't given it. And the fact that they haven't given it makes me feel more confident in it. But that said, I don't want to have Dune at my number 1. I want to have The Substance. The Substance has, I would say, maybe the best makeup work that I've ever seen in my entire life. And at this point, how I feel is either The Substance gets snubbed or it wins. And I'm leaning right now towards a snub, unfortunately. And that's because I just feel like people get so grossed out by the movie. I mean, you saw the film pretty recently with your grandma, with your mom, and they hated it.
Yeah, for lack of better words, they were not major fans of it. My mom, though, as we sat afterwards in the next few days while she was visiting, warmed up more to the film overall. But yeah, they were not much of fans of the movie.
So that to me is a bad omen, because I have a feeling, just an inkling, that the demographic of the makeup branch of the Academy is going to be your mom and your grandma's age women. It might be a little too much.
My grandma, she loved Everything Everywhere. She loved Poor Things. So it's not like she doesn't like these out there weirder concepts. She's usually into them. This one, though, was not.
Which is why I think that Beetlejuice gets a nomination, which I will call The Substance for cowards. And that's why it gets a nomination and could be a win contender. But again, if The Substance gets a nomination and the rest of the Academy gets a say on it, then I think it wins. It's just the nomination that's the hurdle. I've hesitated a bit with Wicked, but that feels like an easy nomination for it at this point. And also, A Complete Unknown fills our biopic prosthetic quota. We've got a prosthetic nose on Timothée Chalamet. I still also see Saturday Night as a possibility for a biopic nomination, but the work there is much more impressive on the hair side. They don't give a shit about hair. This branch does not care. Hair can get you on a short list. Can't get you a nomination. Also, I currently have Emilia Perez getting a coattail nomination here based on the early movie Manites look for Carla Sofia Gascon, because she kind of transforms into this terrifying cartel boss with tattoos and grills. That feels like it could be enough for a nomination. I see you have Nosferatu very, very high. I think my feeling overall in Nosferatu, I feel like they're going to hide Count Orlok so much. But then again, we almost saw Last Voyage of the Demeter get in, and they also hid the vampire through that, right?
They did, and I feel like that may work into the film's favor here with Nosferatu, because it's not just Count Orlok who has the heavy makeup and hairstyling. It's also a period film, so there's going to be lots of facial hair, lots of hairstyling, which I know we have this conversation every year. This branch doesn't really care about hair, but it will have hair in addition to the creature makeup, so it's kind of fitting both of those boxes if this film ends up hitting the way that I've been trying to predict throughout the year. I think it's one where if it makes the short list, it's a win contender, and that's why I have some other, I guess you could call them out there movies in my 10, because I could see them in the short list. Nomination, though, is a whole other hurdle, like Sasquatch Sunset, which we saw earlier this year. It is one of, if not the most impressive work this year, but it's not a film that I feel like many people will either watch or really go out of their way to be like, let's nominate this. And then a film that I know you see very recently, I saw last week, A Different Man. You could call it a variation of The Substance. If they're going for one of those, they're going to go for The Substance. They're not going for A Different Man.
It seems like an incredible work with A Different Man, but the film just seems too small. It couldn't do critic awards, but it's not going to make it to the Oscars, in my opinion, at least. Anyways, let's move on to the song category, one that still feels so uncertain this far out.
It does, and that's why I'm actually going to ask you for some suggestions here for my number one, because I've heard the reactions of Amelia Perez. There is no definitive song. I know that Brother Bros app is saying El Camino and Mi Camino, so I want to ask you if I were going to put an Amelia Perez song at my number one, because I do think this is a category where they will try to make sure this happens, regardless of the singer involved. But the director, Jack Audiard, is credited as a songwriter on most of these tracks, so it's a way to give him acclaim. It can be a function of the campaign for this film, because he can't win for international feature, so he could win here.
I believe he's only credited on one song on the soundtrack,
okay,
which is El Mal. Funny thing, though, I'm about 99% sure that El Camino and Mi Camino are the same song. I looked up the soundtrack on Genius, and obviously the soundtrack has not been released, but they do have a track list for it, and there is no El Camino. There's just Mi Camino, and it's the Selena Gomez song. That song left no impression on me. I would say that a Selena Gomez track is like one of the least likely songs that would be nominated from this, and people are just stan-dicting and saying, well, it's a pop star and it's Selena Gomez, we'll put that in. Because I think she posted a clip of it on her Instagram. That's why people are predicting El Camino / Mi Camino. I don't think it's one of the contenders. On the other hand, though, El Mal is the song where Zoe Saldana is wearing the red suit. It's the song in the ballroom. It's the one I've been on all year since seeing the movie. It's the one that everyone talks about when they get out of the movie. Even people who hate the movie, we'll give a shout out right now to Ezra, one of our Discord members and a prominent film Twitter dude. He's one of the movie's biggest haters, and even he, when asked to say what he likes about the movie, he gave 4 things. He said he likes Carla Sofia Gascon, he likes Zoe Saldana, he likes the song El Mal, and he likes that it ended. So for it to be, I think, most people's highlight of the movie, that feels like this could be a song that gains momentum and eventually ends up winning the category. I just want the song to release so that I can listen to it again and know if it's just liked because it's in the movie or if it's liked because it's actually catchy.
That fits, though, because the highlight that most people say from Amelia Perez is Zoe Saldana, so it would make sense that her song would be the one to come along with, and that's why if you see on this graphic here, that's my number one. And then for default, I have the Selena Gomez one at number 2, but if there is a Gascon song, probably would interchange those. I feel like this will be the first instance in a long time where a film gets 2 songs in this category, because we actually have an original musical for the first time competing since like La La Land. Then the rest of the categories where it gets interesting. I do have a Lin-Manuel Miranda Mufasa song in. We don't know any of the songs yet. We haven't heard any of the songs yet. I feel like there will be one that's super catchy, or that Disney just says, we're making this one happen, just like Encanto. To fill out the category, we saw last year that this branch assures you 2 things. 1, Diane Warren gets in if she has a song, so let's put a Diane Warren song in here. And 2, if there's a very well-respected musician who has an original song and a documentary about themselves, they'll probably do it. So Pharrell's song, come on in here, and that's what makes up my top 5.
Piece by Piece, I think, could win. It's so catchy, and what I think makes it different from Jon Batiste's song from American Symphony is that this actually feels like one of Pharrell's best songs in years, versus Jon Batiste's being like it feels like it was cut from one of his albums. It just doesn't feel like it makes the cut. Piece by Piece is fun, and when he performs it, like, he brought a marching band to TIFF. It's fun, it's catchy, it's upbeat. That's why it's my number 1 in the category. But you're right, though. We need to have Diane Warren in, so we've got The Journey from 688. I also wonder, do you think Bob Dylan could make a song for A Complete Unknown?
He could, and if he does, seems pretty likely to be in the realm. He could not as well.
Exactly,
Don't really know
yes.
what Bob Dylan's thoughts are on another biopic about himself. If he's in favor, maybe we could get a song.
Apparently, he's in favor of this one. Apparently, that's what I've heard. Also, here's another question. I know that we can normally write off original songs written for musical adaptations. Time and time again, we see these musicals adapted for the screen, and we think maybe, just maybe, they could add a song in. I think The Prom was one that was like widely predicted until people heard the song and went, oh God, oh no, not The Prom. But Wicked is 2 hours and 40 minutes long, and it's only the first half of the musical. How many original songs are in this goddamn thing?
That is a very great question, because that goes back to something that we touched on a little bit before, is what is this movie going to be? Is it going to be adapting more from the source material novel, so it's more world building, maybe not as many songs, or are they going to add more songs and potentially some Grande songs, potentially some Arrivo songs, two very great vocalists who probably have some fans in the Academy. If there's new original ones, it's not going to be like those songs that are just the end credits. It's not going to be like those songs that kind of like they just stand there and sing. It's probably going to allow these songs to be more visual feasts for the eyes to potentially make their way into this category. I kind of want to hear it before I put it in, because like you said, there's times where we think, oh, it has a song, let's just throw it in. But when we don't really know what the song is, I just want to stay away from potential credit song. That's why I have Mufasa in, is it's not going to be a credit song. There's going to be songs throughout the movie. Wicked, we can probably infer, but we don't really know. And that's why I have something like a Bird from Sing Sing and Compress or Repress from Challengers off my top 5, but in my top 10. They're credit songs. They have other things to go with. I saw a rumor the other day online that Wicked Part 1 is Wicked the Musical, and Wicked Part 2 is The Wizard of Oz.
Ooh.
It was from some random person, so it wasn't like a real source or rumor, but it posed the question because the trailer does show stuff that happens in Act 2, and it gets the gears going.
I'm going to be honest. I would be hyped the fuck up if suddenly it was revealed that Wicked Part 2 coming out next year is actually a fully original musical with entirely new songs. I don't even like Wicked. I would freak out.
Well, speaking about freaking out, I feel like a lot of people are going to freak out this next category. I feel like you and me are often kind of in agreement in the score category of what is eligible and what isn't. And I think a lot of people online don't really see that, and they just say, well, this movie, this movie, this movie. And sometimes they have 3 movies from the same composer in their top 5. Not saying Our Lives Are Better, because I have Challengers at my number 1, which is a total LOL type pick. But Matt, what's your number 1 currently?
Well, to address Challengers first, I'll just say I have a feeling this is going to be the score that we see every year, like last year with Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, where every single critic goes out for it. It gets into Golden Globes, it gets into the Critics' Choice, and then at the end of the day, it gets cut from the Oscar lineup. I feel like this is going to be the big nomination morning snub of the category where it's just too cool to get nominated. With that said, my win is The Brutalist because it's a generational score. It's one of those scores that genuinely makes the movie better. It's still going through my head, and I saw the movie almost a month ago. The score isn't online. There's no trailer. There's nowhere you can hear this music. It's still stuck in my head. The score is also so central to understanding the movie and the links it's drawing between Nazi Germany and white supremacist America. And if the film is as strong as I think, if it is one of the contenders to win Best Picture, the score is one of the easiest wins to give it. But that said, there's a classic thing that I've felt over the years, and I call this the greatest score of all time loses to a pretty good score thing. And it's a pattern that we saw with Phantom Thread losing to The Shape of Water in 2017, or If Beale Street Could Talk losing to Black Panther in 2018. Both times you have this score that's classical and magnificent and really doing something unique with the orchestrations, losing to something that's charming and it's good and it's for a movie that people really like, but it's not as special. And this feels like The Brutalist could be that too good to win score.
Another score that feels like it should be our number 1 in the category, but for some reason I don't really want to put at number 1, is Emilia Perez.
The music in Emilia Perez is largely really abstract. It's oftentimes a bit grating, a bit hard to listen to. Part of me is feeling like it gets snubbed, but that's a ridiculous thing to predict right now. I would actually say it's probably the biggest spoiler for the win. It's an original musical. I just think that the songs take a lot more of the centerpiece, than the score does.
Talk about potential snub. Let's throw Dune out the window. Let's throw Joker out the window, saying those films are ineligible. We see this every year with this category. There's always one major, you could call them top 6, top 7 contender, that just misses the short list. If you had to predict one movie right now, would that be Emilia Perez for you, or would you go out to say another film?
If we're not considering Dune as that, I would say Saturday Night, which has had a lot of talk about the score, but it's mostly drums. And it reminds me a bit of Birdman and how that was rendered ineligible for some reason. Saturday Night is one that, oh God, that score is so good. Even as someone who didn't love the movie, the score is so good. And also it's Jon Batiste, and there's a great story behind the score, which is that it was improvised live on set while the actors were working, but it could still miss the shortlist. Also, just to talk about Dune, to touch on it, I've heard a lot of people say that this just has to win again. I've been saying all year long it gets disqualified. Even if it's not disqualified, I don't think it makes it in, because this year is too good for scores to default to a score that already won 3 years ago. No matter how much people say, oh, but it's different than the first one. I know, I agree. I like this score better than the first movie, but at the same time, it still sounds the same as the first movie. And in a year where we have scores like The Brutalist, like Emilia Perez, Conclave, The Room Next Door, The Wild Robot, Challengers, we haven't even heard Blitz yet, but that's another Hans Zimmer score that's going to be different and probably new in some way. With all of those scores, I don't know if I can justify having Dune any higher than I have it at number 9 right now.
Another factor working against Dune's favor is, I mean, if you just go to Apple Music, you just go to Spotify, look at Hans Zimmer's discography. Dune, they put out 3, 4, 5 different versions of that album to showcase all of his work, to showcase like, hey, this is stuff I didn't get in the movie. We still want you to hear it. Dune Part 2, there's just one album. There's no deluxe. It's just the movie version. And at least to me, that reads as we're not prioritizing this as much as the last one.
Sequel scores don't do well with, it's the same as the cinematography branch. It just doesn't do well. Now, one other thing I'll mention here is The Wild Robot, because that score is a goddamn banger. Holy shit. The sequence where the kid is leaving home and the music just grows. That scene to me felt like the first flight sequence in How to Train Your Dragon. Like, it's transcendent stuff. But that said, predicting animated score noms is always really risky to do. We've seen a few of them in the past few years, like Encanto. We saw it for Soul, which ended up winning. But outside of that, it's pretty rare to get those animated nominations. And we saw Spider-Verse miss last year. So that's why I have it outside of my top 5. But I could easily see Wild Robot replace something like Room Next Door or Saturday Night.
Wild Robot would probably be the answer to the question that I asked you, of just the one that I feel like is really high on the potential ballot that could get just blanked on the short list.
I think it'll be there because, again, Chris Bowers is also an Oscar winner. He's someone that they really like, and it's his chance to really show his stuff. On the animated front, could Flow get a short list here? I'm starting to wonder if the movie's big enough. They're doing like a 1,000 theater wide release for it's Janus Films doing 1,000 theater wide release for Flow.
It's one that I made sure to try to get in both my Filmball teams, just because of the buzz I've heard around this film from people like you, from other people who have seen it early on, is they just say this film is something special, and that sounds like it could be animated featured. And if the score clicks, I'm not going to say it's going to get a score, but it could shortlist a score.
Anyways, that is the end of our very long video. I don't know how long the edit is. We've been here for an hour and 45 minutes talking about this. So that's a lot. There's a lot of categories. And I think my big takeaway for the day is I'm feeling much more confident in Blitz below the line than I thought I was.
It does sound like that, and I will be very excited to report to you if your confidence is good or your confidence is not.
And you get to see 2 movies before I do, because you see Nickel Boys very soon. You see Blitz before me. And finally, we're going to get some of those bolds on your lists, because up until this point, I've got most of my lists on our predictions bolded because I've seen everything. We need to start getting you seeing this stuff.
I'm excited too. I mean, you had a lot of help with Cannes, with TIFF.
Yep.
Now it's my turn. I got a few festivals coming up, so I get to, like you said, bold some movies. And hopefully the movies I bold will stay in my predictions, and it's not bolding movies that are dropping down the ranks.
Hopefully. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, everyone. As always, my name is Matt.
My name is Dyl, and this has been Fantasy Filmball.